We've touched on the hydrogen water a few times, but I want to go a bit deeper there.
Sure.
You mentioned you're no longer using the bottles, you're sticking with the tabs. Are you always drinking hydrogen water, or do you ever have any other water?
I'll drink hydrogen water 2 or 3 times throughout the day, always before I get to a hyperbaric session. So always before getting in a hyperbaric or immediately after getting out of a hyperbaric, I'll drink hydrogen water. And if you're using hyperbaric therapy, you should be drinking hydrogenated water prior to that treatment, either inhaling the hydrogen gas or drinking it. Because remember that oxidative stress, oxidation, is caused by oxygen. One of the reasons why people that live at altitude have precipitously longer life expectancies is that the amount of oxygen that is coming into the system is commensurate with the amount of oxygen that's being utilized. When we have excess oxygen, oxygen becomes a free radical and creates oxidation, especially in phospholipid membranes and our cell membranes, but also is a part of other reactive oxygen species, superoxide, which is good in at certain levels, but superoxide in high levels causes oxidative stress. Hydrogen peroxide is excellent at certain levels. When it becomes too high, it causes oxidative stress. Hydroxyl free radicals have no use in the body other than causing damage. And what's interesting about hydrogen is hydrogen selectively targets these. So there is a pathway, not to bore your audience to tears, but there's a pathway in our cellular biology called the NRF2 pathway. This is a pathway that directly affects the DNA. It's a protein signaling pathway for the DNA. And the NRF2 pathway will influence the DNA to create antioxidants. So if you have superoxide, it will create superoxide dismutase. It will create catalase. It also creates glutathione. Because one of the prevailing theories that I think is a horrible idea is that the more antioxidants we take, the healthier we are. You can way overdo it on vitamin C. You can way overdo it on glutathione. You can way overdo it on quercetin, elderberry, all of these antioxidants that drive reactive oxygen species too low. Not all oxidation or reactive oxygen species are bad. You want to maintain a balance. Only hydrogen gas has the capacity to act as a selective antioxidant. I'm not aware of any other selective antioxidant on the planet that you can ingest. So if you took too much hydrogen gas, because 10% of your body weight is hydrogen, you would have no consequences. If you take too much vitamin C or too much quercetin or too much elderberry or too many antioxidants, you can severely damage your cellular biology. You can actually have severe disruption in the mitochondria because you have reduced reactive oxygen species too low. So hydrogen gas is a selective antioxidant. You can bathe in hydrogen gas. It will go right transdermal. I have put people into, and this is all over the public media. Look up Sean Ryan's testimony on hydrogen gas. He's a former Navy SEAL. He came to my house to do a podcast, and he was telling me that he had pain, basically everywhere in his body from just from being in the special forces for so many years. And I said, dude, you got to get in my bathtub. And he was like, and his answer was, I just met you. And I was like, I'm not going to get in there with you, Sean. I'm going to put you in there by yourself, and I'm going to run hydrogen gas into the tub. And he said it was the first time, the next morning was the first time he had woken up without pain in 15 years. And it was the best night's sleep he's ever gotten. I've put people into that tub, I kid you not, almost crippled with arthritis, and they skip out of my unit like they won the lottery because it has such a profound effect on the inflammatory cascade. And there are research studies comparing this to the RICE protocol, rest, ice, compress, and elevate. There are clinical studies that compare this to traditional concussive therapies for treating concussions, traumatic brain injuries, and CTEs, where hydrogen gas far outpaces the RICE protocol, soaking a limb in hydrogen gas immediately after an injury, or inhaling or drinking hydrogen water post-concussion. There's a very interesting study published in It was published in November of 2021, and it was in the Journal of Experimental Gerontology. That's an excellent one to take a look at if you're interested in going down the road of hydrogen gas and hydrogen water, because this took participants that were over the age of 70, and it was a 6-month-long study. They put one cohort on hydrogen water, and the other cohort was not on hydrogen water. And they did a detailed analysis of their methylation pathways. They used something called the TET2 marker to measure methylation. They looked at their sit-stand ratios. They measured their short-term recall, their cognitive function, hand-eye coordination, timing. They also looked at their levels of vitamin D3, their utilization of vitamin D3. They looked at inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, homocysteine, creatine phosphokinase. And across the board, you saw dramatic improvements in the hydrogen water group, and you saw paucity or an absence of those improvements in the control group. And I mean, I think there's two types of people out there: those that know about hydrogen water and hydrogen gas, and those that don't, or those that haven't read the studies and are attacking it because they haven't read the studies. You can go to hydrogenstudies.com, and there are 1,300 peer-reviewed articles on there that you could, peruse through. You can actually deselect the animal studies and read the human studies. I am an enormous, enormous proponent of hydrogen water and hydrogen gas.
Okay. Big fan of hydrogen water.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
You're only as good as the water you're using as your base. We have a wide array of different waters to choose from. Tap, which both of us I know would urge against, but we also have RO water, spring water.
Urge against. I mean, as soon as you get
for sure
some financial wherewithal, you should get water filtration, at least in the area where you're drinking in your house.
What do you do for yourself? What do you use as the base that you put your hydrogen tabs in?
So I use filter water. I'll drink, there's 3 types of bottled water I drink. One is called the Fora. This is not cost effective, but I also drink Saratoga, which comes in glass, and I drink Icelandic, which comes in glass. But the vast majority of the time, I am drinking 4-stage RO filtered water that is remineralized. If you put water through for the 4 stages of reverse osmosis, you've essentially killed its structure, because water it actually has chemical properties, but it also has physical properties. But it's devoid of all minerals, devoid of all electrolytes. Now you've removed the chlorine, the fluoride, the polyfluoroalkyls, and the pharmaceuticals and everything else. So I have a really good water filtration system in my house, especially where we drink. I filter the water that comes into the house, but I also really filter the water that comes out of the tap in the kitchen. So I take that water that's gone through 4 stages of reverse osmosis, and I just add mineral salt, Baja Gold salt. I'll add, I add perfect aminos and hydrogen to it. And that's the first thing I do in the morning: hydrate, mineralize, and get all 9 essential amino acids. If you just tried that for a week, you would see a profound difference in what I would call your waking energy, your cognitive function, just that sense of clarity and zen that you have. You add a hormetic stress like cold plunging or cold water immersion or cold showers and sunlight, and you'll put that entire thing on steroids. I mean, most people that are watching this podcast have forgotten what it feels like to feel normal. And they're walking around at about 60%, maybe 50% of their true state of normal. And by hydrating, mineralizing, and dropping the inflammatory cascade first thing in the morning, the light switch just comes right on.
You quickly touched on the structure of water. How do you feel about these devices? Wands, there's devices you can put your glass of water in to restructure. Is that something you do?
I do once in a while. I have something called an Analema, which is a restructuring device. I actually have that piped into the house, so it actually goes through this helical, spiral structure to restructure the water. I'm a big believer in structured water. Water's structured when it's in a stream, when it's in a running stream. It's also full of minerals. A lot of the trace minerals that nobody talks about, things like molybdenum, selenium, silica, boron, manganese, not the big 3 that everybody hears about, potassium, magnesium, sodium, but electrolytes and minerals that are severely deficient in our food supply, and severely deficient in our water supply, that are critical to our cellular biology. So you can restructure it with something like an Analema. There are a lot of restructuring devices you can get out there. But I think primarily when you're talking about water, you want to filter the water because you want to get what's called PFAs, these polyfluoroalkyls. You want to get chlorine and fluoride out of the water. I do it. It's probably still up on my Instagram, but I do a little experiment all the time, and I just take 2 clear glasses of tap water and I set them on a table, and I get a volunteer to take 4 fingers and put them into one of the glasses of water for about 30 seconds, and then take their 4 fingers out. And then what I'll do is I'll take a chlorine testing kit that you can get on Amazon for about $6, and I'll put several drops of this chlorine testing solution in each glass. One will turn bright yellow, showing the presence of chlorine, and one will be crystal clear, showing that there's no chlorine. But they both came from the same tap, so they both had the same chlorine when I started. So the question is, where did the chlorine go? It went into your skin. So when you put your 4 fingers in there for 30 seconds, that chlorine went right transdermal and entered the bloodstream. Now you think, I'm showering in that, I'm bathing in that, I'm cooking in that, I'm drinking with that, I'm washing my hands with that, I'm brushing my teeth with that. And it is this micro dosing of poisons that is overwhelming our immune system. They say that the dosage determines the poison. I don't believe that. I believe that the cumulative dosage determines the poison. Nobody ever got sick from a single piece of mercury-laden tuna fish. People have gotten deadly mercury poisoning from repeatedly eating the same amount of mercury-laden tuna fish. And so it is the accumulation of these toxins that very often is so detrimental to our health. So the very first place that I would spend money if I was, going to start down the journey of biohacking would be on water filtration. Before you get to the exotic things like red light and a hydrogen bath and a hyperbaric chamber or something like that. That's one of the best things you can do for your family is add really good water filtration to your home. And fluoride, sadly, if you look at the 2023 and 2024 National Toxicology Program, where they actually looked at about 3,600 municipalities, and this is widely available online. If you look at National Toxicology Program fluoride study, it will come right up. I think it was about 3,600 municipalities, and in every municipality that they studied, there was a corresponding increase. And so as the level of fluoride went up, the IQ went down. So as the level of fluoride increased in the water, the IQ in that region went down, especially in prepubescent teens, that developmental phase, they're very, very susceptible to that. If you actually go to the National Institute of Medicine at the National Library of Health, you'll see that fluoride is categorized as a neurotoxin. So there's absolutely marginal, if any, benefit at all to drinking fluoridated water and preventing tooth decay. You can get fluoride treatments at your dental office, but the drinking fluoridated water and its correlation to tooth decay, somebody please find me a study that shows that drinking fluoridated water has a positive impact on reducing dental caries, or what they call cavities. So we put a neurotoxin in our water because fluoride, for the record, is actually something called fluorosilicic acid. Fluorosilicic acid is the waste product from phosphate fertilizer production. So we produce billions of metric tons of phosphate fertilizer in this country. When we don't remove the fluorosilicic acid, it can burn the root of the plant. So we take the fluorosilicic acid out, and that's called fluoride. And then we dump that fluorosilicic acid into our municipal water supply. And then we drink it. And so I'm not a big fan of fluoride or fluoride toothpaste. I'm a huge fan of filtering your water.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
I don't have a watch problem or a car problem. I kind of have a biohacking problem. Most people that are watching this podcast have forgotten what it feels like to feel normal. And they're walking around at about 60% of their true state of normal. And by hydrating, mineralizing, and dropping